Good afternoon, Pnawn da, and thank you for joining me for the Welsh Government's weekly media briefing. Today, I'll set out some of the bold action that this Welsh Government is taking to help our economy bounce back from the combined effects of the UK's exit from the European Union and, of course, the still not completed COVID pandemic. This includes new support that we're providing to help businesses to step up to meet the challenges and opportunities of the climate emergency. To help mark Wales Climate Week, we've launched a 5-day programme of virtual events focused on the key challenges that we need to face up to help secure the future of our planet. We'll also kickstart a nationwide conversation on our recently published Net Zero Wales plan and the collective action needed to ensure that Wales meets its targets. We want the week to help us to celebrate what Wales has already achieved, the change we expect in the next 5 years, and how, together, we can shape our future. Reaching our net zero targets depends upon a cross-government action, and we know businesses have an important part to play in this too. The industry and business chapter of the Net Zero Plan sets out a vision focused on sustainability, fair work, and the industries and services of the future. It makes clear that by 2025, we should expect to see a 4% decrease in energy usage in industry, an increase in electrification, and the growth of hydrogen as a fuel. One of the ways we can help these industry targets to be met is by supporting small and medium-sized businesses across Wales to decarbonise their operations. And we do know what a difficult time our businesses have faced over the last 2 years. COVID restrictions, the UK's exit from the European Union, rising prices, supply chain issues and labour shortages are all factors that many of our businesses continue to grapple with. Since the start of the pandemic, we provided more than £2.5 billion of emergency business support, which has helped to protect more than 160,000 jobs which might otherwise have been lost. Strong budget management with a laser-like focus on jobs allowed us to make this happen with a business support package that went further than the offer made in England. This week I visited Advanced Energy Services in Cross Keys. Now they're a company focused on the green economy and they benefited from a COVID support package from the Welsh Government. Advanced Energy Services dedicate themselves to boosting the energy efficiency of businesses and homes with products and skills that will be essential in the transition to a lower carbon economy. Our long-term task is to get ahead in the industries that will drive that transition, helping Wales to win the green jobs dividend that comes with our net zero plans. If we can maximise these opportunities, we can also retrain and attract more young people in a stronger Welsh economy that is fit for the future. I welcome the strong message sent yesterday by the business community to the Prime Minister, where the CBI made clear that the green economy offers investment and job opportunities right across the UK. From the steel industry to tidal power, the UK government must now show that they get this and prove to Wales that levelling up is not over before it ever began. It is with these goals in mind that I'm pleased to announce new support for our economy today. I'm making an additional £45 million package of support available to help Wales take the next steps in an uncertain recovery with a clear focus on combating climate change. This includes £35 million aimed at helping our small and medium-sized businesses to relaunch, decarbonise and grow. The funding, which will be administered by local authorities, is designed to support more than 1,000 businesses, to help create 2,000 new jobs and to safeguard a further 4,000 jobs. We're asking business to look at how this investment can help them to relaunch, embrace innovation and create new jobs. The fund is also designed to tackle some of the major issues facing Wales, from investment to address skills gaps, support fair work and tackle climate change. In a joint initiative with the Minister for Education and Welsh Language, Jeremy Miles, I'm also pleased to announce an additional £10 million to boost our popular personal learning accounts. This extra funding will provide flexible, quality courses designed to boost the job and pay prospects of workers on lower pay. This investment matches that support to the needs of priority sectors and those facing labour shortages as a result of the UK's exit from the European Union and, of course, COVID. This means funding specifically targeted at re-engaging and retraining staff to return to work in the NHS and social care. It means training more HGV lorry drivers and reskilling people to respond to new job opportunities in green construction and renewable energy. And it means ensuring there are more trained chefs waiting in front of house staff to work in our hospitality sector. We expect the additional funding for personal learning accounts to help an extra 2,000 people access a wide range of job and earning opportunities in those sectors where we know that more people are needed. This latest £45 million business support package is another example of the action we're taking to protect jobs and livelihoods and to kickstart a strong Welsh recovery. Unlike the UK government's approach to EU replacement funds, these are decisions about Wales taken in Wales. We recognise that going forward, businesses need stability and certainty from responsible governments in order to plan for the future. And the cooperation deal we struck with Plaid Cymru will help the Welsh Government offer more certainty in these challenging times. However, I do remain deeply concerned that schemes like this will not be possible as part of the UK's plans for their levelling up funds, which currently leave Wales with less say over less money at the worst possible time. I'm happy now to take questions from journalists who are here with us today. And the first is Hugh Thomas from BBC Wales.
Thank you, Minister. On that, the 35 million that you've announced, how quickly will that bit of money be made available? And what do you think fundamentally businesses should be doing with it?
Well, the funds will be made available through local authorities within the next few weeks, so it won't be a very long time before local authorities have the funds available. And we're aiming to have that money spent within the rest of this financial year. So it's money to help businesses to invest in themselves, but also to unlock investment plans they already have. And we do want them to have a real focus on decarbonisation as part of the plans that we want businesses to provide. There's a range of businesses that may think about energy efficiency, may think about insulation, may think about changing some of their processes. But also this should support the broader ambitions that we set out in our economic and resilience mission in the event that I held a month ago. But in particular, we also want business to look at their supply chains. Now, there's both a dividend in terms of carbon in reducing supply chains and not having everything transported much longer distances, including between vastly different countries. But also that should help us in making sure that in reshoring supply chains, we end up with local businesses gaining more work from that. So it should support more jobs in our supply chain. I'm also going to help some support as well in terms of the ongoing response to COVID. So, for example, to help people to work in well-ventilated spaces and be able to work smartly and differently too. So there's a range of criteria that businesses can use to work with their local authorities and be well advertised across every local authority in the country.
Thank you. And secondly, the recruitment company Economi has told me that the best thing that the government can do right now is to train. £10 million today we know is going towards skills, but you'll need to throw millions more at this to sort out the skills gap, won't you?
Yeah, and it's one of my real concerns about the challenge we have with the current approach of the UK government. So we're putting £10 million more into personal learning accounts that broadly help lower paid workers to access training and skilled opportunities. And as I said, we know there are lots of industries that need people. We do, though, for the future, there are key challenges that we have, not just with the Young Person's Guarantee, where we're setting aside money to help young people into the world of work, education or training to improve their prospects, but our apprenticeship programme, which is not just for younger people. We're going to increase it by 25% over the course of this Senedd term. But that apprenticeship programme was funded by a third of its money in its current form comes from the European funds that we received. Now, if we don't get certainty on that, then what we're going to be faced with is a really dreadful choice of we either maintain the support in that part of reskilling people in our workplace, and that will mean we'll meet the ambitions we set and the manifesto we stood on, the manifesto every party in the Senedd stood on to increase apprenticeships. but that will mean there'll be a gap in other parts of our support for the economy, and that's a direct price that comes from the very clear broken promise in the Conservative manifesto about European funds. It's on page 44 if you want to check it, Hugh, in the Conservative manifesto from 2019, where the promise was every nation would have at least the same amount available to it with replacement funds. And we know from the budget that isn't going to happen. So it's a challenge for us. We'd like a much more sensible and grown-up conversation. We'd like real investment rather than yet another broken promise. Thank you, Hugh. I've now got Owain Phillips from ITV Wales.
Pnawn da. Could I ask on vaccine passes, could you confirm if the Cabinet have discussed extending vaccine passes to the use in pubs and restaurants?
Well, we don't have vaccine passes, Owen. We have a COVID pass. That's either to demonstrate that you've been vaccinated or you've had a recent lateral flow test. Now, we have had those discussions, and I've had direct discussions with business groups as well. And if you look at today's figures, you'll see that in half of the local authorities across Wales, rates increased. Overall, our rates are a bit up from last week. They're still very high at well over 500 in 100,000. And so there is real concern that if we tolerate that level of COVID in the population without taking further steps, we could end up seeing more pressure go into our health and care system. That could cause not just challenges for health and care, but for businesses as well. Because businesses already know that they're facing challenges in a tight labour market where they need more people, with people who are then needing to isolate because they have COVID too. So it's a challenge for businesses and how they manage and work alongside their workforce. It's also about the public, and we will want to carry on enjoying retail and hospitality for the future. So doing the right thing in retail and wearing a face covering is important. It's important to treat staff with kindness and respect. And we are having those conversations about whether we will need to roll out the COVID pass to give us an extra line of protection against more significant action that really would have a great impact on jobs and businesses. So those conversations do continue, and the Cabinet will be discussing it again later on this week.
And you mentioned the cooperation agreement with Plaid Cymru. Would you envisage that agreement continuing if and when Mark Drakeford decides to stop being First Minister?
Well, that's a matter for the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru to think about in the future. What we have set out is the expectation that we want this agreement to start formally on the 1st of December, and it would then last for 3 years. And if you want to know when the First Minister is planning to stand down, you need to have that conversation with him. But the agreement is between the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru, and all of us expect that agreement, as long as Plaid Cymru's conference endorse it, to carry on for the full 3 years. But we'll carry on, of course, talking with other parties where opportunities arise to make further progress for Wales. But the stability the agreement provides will allow us to plan our budget over that longer term, stability for public services and for business in the way we can work alongside the economy. And I think that's a good thing for Wales. Thank you, Owain. And we've now got Will Hayward from Wales Online.
Thank you, Minister. Your government has announced some ambitious plans around childcare and free school meals. Can you outline exactly how these are going to be funded? Will the money be coming from existing pots? And will the school meals, in particular, be coming out of the school's budget?
Well, you're going to hear that when the Finance Minister publishes the budget, and I'm not going to try and spike the Finance Minister's announcements here today, as you'd expect, Will. But the 3-year approach means we can have much greater certainty about how to increase spend in a range of areas, including in free school meals for our primary schools. So that stability really does mean that shared policy priorities have a much better prospect of being delivered, and free school meals is just one of those areas.
Thank you. So it's fair to say it has been costed then. With Christmas coming up, people will be asking what sort of Christmas we're in for. With it almost exactly a month away, can you give some insight into any of the challenges you expect with regards to shortages and supply chains? Will there be any particular item shortages, whether that be toys or food? And are we expecting restrictions over Christmas to be similar to what they are now based on the current modelling?
OK, so the challenge of this Christmas is that you've already heard, for example, turkey producers saying there'll be enough turkey for everyone to have a turkey, but the choice will be limited. So we are seeing some constraints, and you also have heard that some suppliers are worried about their supply chains for a range of goods coming in. I couldn't give you a guarantee here, and it would be foolish of me to try to do so, about the exact nature of all of those supply chains and all of the challenges that might arise in the next week or two. So Christmas this year, though, will undoubtedly be substantially better than last year, because I really don't think we're going to have to make the same sort of decisions we did last year, unless there really is a vaccine-busting variant that would cause real concern for us here. The challenge, though, is when you look around the rest of Northern and Eastern Europe, you're seeing a further surge in COVID cases, and we already have very high case rates here. The vaccination programme provides us with tremendous support and the ability to carry on having a range of services and businesses open. And that's why we haven't seen the sort of the extraordinary challenge that our health and care system faced at this time last year, moving through the Christmas period. It's meant that fewer people need to go to hospital, fewer people are losing their lives, and the difference is extraordinary. That's why we place so much emphasis on encouraging people to get their booster. I'm going to get mine. I've had the appointment. I'll definitely get my booster too. I'd encourage everyone to take that up and to make it as easy as possible for people who work for you or work alongside you to get their booster as well when the opportunity arises. The modelling suggests that we may not need to have further restrictions in place, like going back up the alert levels. The challenge, though, is with the rate of cases we have, we know that will continue to place real pressure on the NHS that is busy with other work in a way it hasn't been for much of the pandemic previously. And we also know that we are going to get a flu season this year. We're not quite sure how significant that will be, but we had very low rates of flu circulating last year. So that's an extra challenge. So that's why, and I think Owen Phillips mentioned this in his first question, that's why we're actively discussing whether we do need to further roll out the COVID pass in hospitality. Cabinet will meet again this week. We've had active conversations across hospitality, and they understand that this is one extra measure that could help us to maintain the level of openness we have now and businesses' ability to trade effectively. They all understand they don't want anything like moving up to alert level 1, because that really will cost businesses and jobs. But we'll need to understand and balance off the high rates of COVID we face, whether we could and should act now, or whether we're prepared to wait and see, and that may mean we may need to take further action in a less managed way than we might otherwise have the opportunity. But those are discussions we'll need to conclude in the near future to give certainty to businesses and the public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I've now got Jordan from LBC.
Thank you, Minister. You mentioned that part of this fund will help retrain staff to return to the NHS and to train more HGV drivers. This is something that's going to take time, but with a tough winter ahead and supply chain issues ongoing, what's being done in the short term to improve those two aspects?
Well, actually, we have got a range of courses that help people either to return to work in the HGV sector, for example. There are opportunities to do so. There's a challenging capacity for people to actually have their tests redone. But this builds on a number of schemes that, for example, I know that Cardiff Council, working with one of their trade unions, have looked at to get people into a place where they can undertake more HGV driving. It's not just an issue for lorries taking goods from one place to another to service our shops, of course. HGV drivers in refuse crews and others, it's a real challenge for public services too, as well. And the work that the GMB and Cardiff Council have done is, I think, a real positive example of what can be done in the more medium term. So there are initiatives that we're encouraging you to look at. I know that we've got staff who have worked in the forces, for example, who have been invited, if they want to reignite their HGV driving licence, to come back into the industry. We are actively trying to recruit into our health and care services as well as looking to train people for the future. But there is very real pressure on our staff in those sectors. So it's why we all need to do the right thing. If we're going and accessing health and care services, to be kind to the staff around us, to do the right thing and not to forget to wear your mask, and if you do, then you may not need to be reminded 3 times to put one on, but also there will be masks available in our shops and in other settings as well. So if we all do the small things that we can do, it amounts up to something that really helps to take pressure off those sectors whilst we're managing a really difficult transition. You know, in some of these sectors, the shortages were predicted, like the shortages after leaving the European Union. And it would have been preferable if the UK had listened to us and used the time to plan for this. Unfortunately, now we're seeing the pandemic has accelerated some of those challenges, but we would always have faced a difficult time now because measures weren't taken after the UK had left the European Union to do something serious about planning for recruiting and training people in areas where we always knew we'd face a shortage.
Thank you. And my second question, specifically on the £10 million part of your announcement and the funding for further education. This is a good opportunity and a good time for young people to be training in things like renewable energy and green construction, isn't it?
Yes, and that's one of the things that we think we can do with this as well. And interesting, the business I visited yesterday, they're investing in the skills their workforce and they expect to expand. And the good thing about that is not just creating more jobs, but there'll be jobs within their local area. So there are real opportunities to think about those choices ahead of us, for the FE providers to get ready with the provision they have, for business to be able to take on apprenticeships in this area, but for young people to think about an area and a career where good rates of pay are available and jobs that we will need, not just for a year or two, but for our long-term future. I think that's really good news, and it's a good place for the Welsh Government to invest public money in. Thank you, Jordan. I've now got Tom Magner from Carers World.
Thank you, Minister. Now that your party has entered a cooperation agreement with Plaid Cymru, calling on your previous experience as Health Minister, what do you believe this agreement means for unpaid carers looking after a friend or relative while struggling to make ends meet financially?
Well, what I think it means is that you're going to find that stability that every government needs to be able to deliver on its programme. You'll also have seen the package jointly announced by the Finance Minister and the Minister for Social Justice. And all that help for people who really are struggling to make ends meet should make a real difference. The challenge is that the interventions we provide should be matched by the UK government and not to make life harder. So we know that a number of people will face real challenges in the choices that have been made, whether it's on the reduction in money that often went to working families with a reduction in universal credit, or whether it is about the change to the plans for the future of social care. All of these things make a difference. So we'd like to see a more progressive approach from the UK government to match where we are, and some real stability in the way that governments of all types behave. And that, of course, matters whether you're on a podium shuffling your papers or whether actually you're having to make really hard and difficult choices, because I know that carers make hard and difficult choices every day to care for their loved ones.
Thank you for that. There's a number of our viewers have become very concerned about one part of the agreement, and perhaps I could see what your reaction to this is. It says, the agreement says it will tackle the so-called second homes crisis with immediate and radical action. So the type of situation I'm being asked about is one where an unpaid carer inherits a house, wants to use it to help their income in difficult circumstances. And it seems as a result of the agreement that you're prepared to hit them hard through council tax premiums and increased taxes because you think that the second home means that a person is wealthy when they may not be. And does it not clash with the Welsh Government view also in the agreement that council tax hits the poorest hardest? Thank you.
Well, there are two things there, Tom. Firstly, on second homes, we really do need to have a balance, and this will matter to everyone who lives in a community, wants that community to have a longer-term future. Where is the balance in home ownership and usage of those homes to make sure that jobs and services can run, so you don't have pressure on primary schools and falling roles, to make sure there's good employment opportunities, and equally that you don't see some of the life taken out of communities, make them special places to visit and be part of, even if you're there for a short-term basis. There is a balance here. So we're thinking about how we make it possible for local people to be able to enter their local housing market. And is that on a purchase basis? Is it shared equity, or is it for rent? So there's a real challenge there about having the right answers, because it isn't as straightforward as saying there's one thing you can ban and everything else will be fine. What we will do, though, is we'll take a full view of all the options available to us, and we want to be able to move at some speed to do this. There'll be further announcements from my colleague, the Minister for Climate Change, Julie James. She's obviously the Housing Minister as part of her brief, and we expect her to set out more of this in public that I think will help address some of the challenges and the concerns that you're setting out. But again, that there isn't a straightforward or an easy choice here. And if you receive an inheritance, then you're receiving a real benefit. We want to work with people to understand what's a fair split between that individual and the community that we want to see have a real prospect for its future, and a future where people don't think that there isn't much of a future in the town or the village where they live. And of course, what we do as taxpayers in funding and supporting general services. And I think you'll see more on where we're going to go with the cooperation agreement in the coming weeks and months for the difficult but the necessary business of actually making it work. And I'm looking forward to be able to do that, because I do think that the stability we have will be a real benefit for people across a range of income levels and for communities up and down the country. And the second home issue isn't just one for rural Wales. There are real challenges for home ownership and access to property and good quality property for people in our urban centres as well. Thanks very much, Tom. And to finish off today, I've got William Vincent.
Thank you, Minister. Whilst most of this fund is going for small businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic, do you believe this will create a stronger economic resilience going forward in the future?
Yes, we do think this will help with the future, because this is actually about getting companies to invest in their future. And there's a challenge about unlocking investment choices that companies would like to make, but giving them enough confidence to do so. And actually, because there's going to be some support from the government in the way we're going to arrange a £35 million fund to be available across the country, it means everyone should have the opportunity to consider it and to access it and to see how that helps with plans that we know businesses have got. But I say many of them are holding off at this point. So this is about kick-starting that reinvestment to go through the rest of this year and to get ready for the plans that we'll be able to set out in some more detail with the budget for how we want to support businesses in the longer term. But stability and dependability from the government is a key factor that business regularly reminds us is something that they want to be able to unlock their own plans to increase further the jobs available here in Wales.
And following on from that, with the fund being administered to small businesses through their local authority, how straightforward will this process be?
Actually, one of the things we've seen through the pandemic is that our relationships in Wales have been tested and improved in a range of areas, both the Welsh Government and businesses, the Welsh Government and local government, and also local government and their business community as well. So local government have, I think, done a fantastic job through the pandemic in providing support and in administering the grant support from funds the Welsh Government's provided, and the relationship they have with their local businesses is stronger as a result. So you'll see the support that we've provided, the £2.5 billion, much of it local authorities have actually helped to deliver locally. And that relationship is something that we're building on and keen to continue to build on and utilise as we move forward. So we have every confidence that local government will be nimble and quick-footed, that they'll have a range of schemes up and running fairly quickly, and that businesses will find it easy to access. So there's a good experience to build on, and I can have confidence, and I hope businesses and local government will do too. Thanks very much for your time, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in the future, no doubt.